What we're going to cover in this chapter, first, we're going to introduce uh, the type of securities called bonds. What are they? How is it different from a loan? And how do we, in fact, go ahead and value these things? Any of you guys heard of bonds? Give me an example. Go ahead. Treasury bonds. Do you know what treasury bonds represent? It's okay if you don't know. I mean, don't make stuff up, okay? I, I don't know is always a good answer because if I know that you don't know, I can teach you. But if you think you know, but you don't, you're delusional. I'm serious. Way back when, I mean, I did this for both research purposes and for exam purposes. It killed my teaching evaluations, but I was tenured by then, so I didn't care. I used to, it, it was kind of a precursor to that third type of exam. Uh, Not only you had to give me an answer on that multiple choice or true false, depending upon the thing, you also had to let me know what kind of confidence you have on that question, on that answer. You could have full, fair, some, and none. If you said I'm fully confident, if you got it right, I gave you actually 125%. But if you got it wrong, you get negative 50%. Fair, you got 100% for right, negative 25 for wrong. Some, you got 75% for right, zero for wrong. If you said none, I actually gave you 30%, whether your answer was correct or not. You're basically telling me that you have no idea. You don't want to risk anything. When I wrote that paper, I actually calculated two coefficients, both for each student and for each question. One of them was called coefficient of confusion, to what extent you are not fully confident, and the other one was coefficient of delusion. If you're fully confident about an answer, but you're wrong, you're delusional, right? That has a lot of feedback value both to students and to instructor. If on a topic, the coefficient of delusion class-wide is pretty high, more than likely that means I taught it wrong. Okay? Or coefficient of confusion is high, maybe I haven't done a good job to make things clear. But students are never too comfortable with that. So in my older age, I developed that other method. Instead of you tell me how confident you are by choosing the degree of difficulty, then you live with the payouts. But I also give you a chance to walk back. And for students who do not want to play that game, you have the other two types as well. So it's literally dial your own exam. You pick your own exam type, degrees of difficulty if need be. But the thing over here is you tell me, if you pick an easy question, you're telling me that you're not very confident on the topic. So when I ask a question during classroom discussions, one of the answers that I like a lot is I don't know, because I can do something about it. That's my job to do something about it. And if you think you know, of course, give that answer. Even if you're wrong during the class, that actually creates teachable moments. Because I am more interested in why you're wrong if you're wrong. That actually highlights the core concept a little bit better. So, who's going to tell me what they think government bonds are? A little bit louder, please. Some of you are, moving your lips. I'm not one of those interpreters who can read lips. In my native language, maybe, but not in English yet. It's okay if you don't have any. idea. Government bonds are, or treasury bonds, they represent the loans treasury borrow from the public, but they are securitized in the following sense. Suppose I borrowed $1 billion as treasury. And for the sake of argument, let's assume coupon rate and the discount rate is the same. The market value of those 1 billion borrowed is going to be 1 billion. But I'm going to divide them into pieces that are each 1,000. In fact, that's called the face value. Each of those securities is called one bond. So in $1 billion issue, I'm going to have 1 million bonds. Then those, each piece, just like stocks, you know, Microsoft has, I don't know, 6 billion stocks outstanding. We can look it up. Each of those can be traded, right? In fact, these days you can even trade fractional amounts thereof. When I first started teaching here, you couldn't do that. I mean, you could, but your broker kind of accommodated you. Now you can officially do it. You can go to Robinhood and say, "I'm going to buy $1 worth of something." It doesn't matter whether the stock price is 50 cents or $5,000. They just do it for you. Bonds are, in general, they are securitized loans. Loans, and these are issued by an issuer. Sometimes it's the Treasury, sometimes it's corporations, sometimes it's banks. Even places like IMF or World Bank, they have their own bonds. So there are all sorts of different bonds, but they're securitized version of a loan, so that those loans can trade in the market. I mean, if you go to your bank and say, I want a $10,000 signature loan, they say, sure, okay. That thing cannot trade in the market. I mean, there are ways to do it. If we will have time, I'll talk about those. You can even securitize those by putting them into a pool, but that's a different animal. But your own $10,000 loan cannot be traded in the market. Your bank actually may choose to sell that loan to somebody else, but you won't be able to go ahead and trade that loan. So bonds are securitized form of loans by an issuer from the public. That public could be anybody. It could be you, me, government of China, Japanese central bank, also known as Bank of Japan, anybody. The difference between, even though we're going to cover this in more detail, the difference between the bond market and the stock market, there is no organized exchange for bonds. All transactions are done so-called over the counter. So if you want to buy a bond, you go to your bank or your financial institution, you tell them, I want to borrow $5,000 worth of this bond. They do it for you. Either they cover it from their own portfolio, or they act as a broker and they place it for you. But you can't go to Robinhood and say, I want to buy this bond. But most of the bond transactions are between large institutions. Nobody's going to entertain a bond trade for you for $10,000 other than your own bank. but banks can trade with each other in denominations of $1 million or more. And it's a pretty active market. Do you guys know how much of US Treasury bonds and bills China holds? It's went down a little bit compared to 5 years ago. Even now, it's on about $900 billion. Since COVID, they actually switched quite a bit of it to euro-based stuff. The government of the Japanese public in general, they own over $1.5 trillion, and quite a bit is owned by public pension funds, Social Security Trust Fund, and Fed sometimes owns some of these bonds, but overall, public also owns them. By the way, when we say that U.S. national debt, which is about $37 billion now, that doesn't mean that there are $37 billion worth of bonds that are around. Quite a bit of those are to Social Security Trust Fund and stuff like that, but it's very, very active market. I think the size is close to $20 trillion. Now, when we define a bond, uh, components of a bond, first we're going to define face value, or let's define the maturity date. This is the date of